Hey guys, Animeakers here. So I just thought I'd give my thoughts on Fermet. As you guys might know, I just finished Volume 17. So there won't be any thoughts about Fermet from like after Volume 17. But yeah, he's a really interesting character. I actually think he might be one of my favorite characters now. He's so evil, and I'm very curious what drives this character to do what he does. Like, what makes him want to be so evil and such a schemer? He always has some sort of machinations going on, like orchestrating everything from volume 12 and 13, and having multiple personalities like the Demolition Guy, Copycat, the Bro, Life, like the whole thing. He's just, he's just a bad guy. I also love his design. When I saw him first, I didn't think too much of it. Like his design, I just thought he had bangs over his head and that was it, and he seemed kind of timid. But then after the reveal of how he actually works, those bangs always feel like he's hiding demon eyes under them or something. It's a really good design for his character. Like the idea that, things are hidden. Um, and yeah, I do especially like that image of him in the 17th novel on the cover where he's twisting his hair looking irritated or frustrated. He does seem to be like tormented in some way, but at the same time, he doesn't. Maybe that's him venting out his frustrations with Elma. Like, one thing I love is that Elma is the biggest kind of enigma in the series at the same time. Like, he's straightforward, but he's also like, what are you doing? Like, he's a crazy guy, and but when he hears about Nikki's death, or death in quotation marks, and that it probably was, that it was done by Fermet's hands, Alma's pretty non-reactive to it. And I absolutely loved that scene. I definitely talked about it in my reaction to that novel. It really is fantastic. But just how childish Fermet gets when he's met with someone like Alma. You get the idea that Fermet, he wants to see certain emotional reactions from Alma, and he can't get it. It does seem like he does enjoy getting emotional reactions from people. Like, for example, with like Miser's father, he goes to his place to deliberately taunt him, but then he found the emotional response and the whole situation lacking. Like, he's like, I'm not getting much juice from this. Like, I feel like he does get off on seeing emotional responses from people, and the more intense the response maybe, or the more like, the more it kind of crushes the person, the more he sees it and he wants to devour it more and more. So yeah, he thought Miser's dad's response was too mild, so he didn't enjoy it. But Shez, on the other hand, the kid who's been terrorized by his memories of Fermet torturing him, and then the guilt of having quote unquote eaten him. I mean, that's just delicious to this guy. It's a good feed, as it were. Like, no wonder he loves Shez so much. It's fuel for him. Poor kid. Hopefully, Shez can get some sort of revenge on him later. Who knows? But and then yeah, the the question becomes like, who the hell did Shez end up eating? You know, whose memories does he have in him? So yeah, I'm loving the long-term mysteries of Baccano right now. Like, the plot is really exciting and entertaining. I think it's kind of amazing that the characters themselves pulled the series through first 10 um in the first 10 novels, and then we actually have more of a plot going on, and that's really really intriguing and entertaining. But yeah, Fermet Lebro Virales. I just get this feeling that in order to understand Fermet, we have to understand like every single one of his names fully. I mean, maybe that's wrong. I don't know. But yeah, he's also, he's part of his past is being part of the people who like persecuted Huey's mother. So I'm hoping we get to go more into that. Now, Huey does seem pretty apathetic towards Fermet, despite being responsible for killing Monica. I mean, so far, I think the worst thing that Fermet has done has definitely been to Shez. Like, he's tormented the kid for centuries, technically, and he's very much reaping the benefits of that in the future. But killing Monica is definitely high on that list, definitely one of the worst things he's done. But I guess Huey and Elmer are just characters that won't give him the emotional response that he desires. Maybe that's why in the future, Huey and Fermet literally talk to each other like everything's okay. Fermat doesn't seem to hate Huey, but I get the impression that he doesn't see that he'll eventually get like emotional juices from the guy, like something that he can hold on to, I guess. Maybe he's got a grand plan for him to try and finally break Huey or Elmer maybe. But I don't know if he's that interested in doing that, or he's decided that he actually can't do that. It might be like an unwinnable game for him. Like especially Elmer, he immediately acknowledges Elmer as his personal kryptonite, like someone he'll never be able to overcome or understand, someone he'll never be able to like torment. In order to torment people, Fermat needs those people to feel things normally, but Elmer doesn't. It's not that he doesn't feel stuff or get sad or have emotions. If someone dies, he does feel sad. But he's very focused on the present, those who are living. So Elmer would still try to make Fermat happy if he could, or make him, smile a genuine smile, even if it's an evil smile. Like, like if Elmer wasn't a decent guy, and maybe he's not, I don't know, but I think he is. Maybe he might be like the worst villain of all. Just doing anything he can to make people have a genuine response of smiling, even if it's like murdering people, just to get that outcome. But yeah, I guess Fermat can't match, that level of villainy, I guess. He can't do anything about it. It's a losing game for him. He's not going to get the emotional response that he wants. On the other hand, Fermat doesn't seem to want just guaranteed wins. It's just that Elmer's an impossibility. What Fermat really wants is to taste the emotional despair of people. That's the impression I get from him right now. Like he's a vampire. Like an emotional vampire, but he's also super calculating. He's like an emotional vampire who's got like a gigabrain computer in his head. Manipulating John Pierre. I can't remember 100%, but I think he also makes sure that illness in Novel 13 arrives with those worshippers who have tortured her in the past and all that stuff with samples. So it's like, yeah, I mean, he definitely did that. So, and then those guys also want to get shares, which is definitely playing into his plan. He was part of those guys. He was disguised. So yeah, definitely he's pulling the strings in all of that, still scheming. But I guess the name of the game is who can actually get out of his web of destruction? Who can actually release themselves from him, because that might actually be a pretty tall order. It seems like something that's pretty difficult to do. He has his hands in everything. He's thought so much on his plans, and those plans have layers, and those layers have layers. It really does make me think that Elmer is the one to ultimately foil his plans. Maybe even Huey as well, but I don't think they'll be foiling his plans, like defeating a villain or something. I think they might do it just by virtue of who they are and how they act. Like, they'll just end up foiling his plans just based on their personalities alone. So even though Huey's been hurt quite badly by Fermat, I think those two, they are kind of like natural enemies to him. But I am hoping that Shez is the one that will ultimately be able to hurt him. The one who'll be able to kind of end it all, and be able to get a victory over him. Because in my mind, Shez is the one who's been hurt by him the most. I think that's why Narita made Shez seeing Fermat to be the reintroduction of Fermat's character. Like, it makes sense, right? Like, Shez has been traumatized by Fermat the most, like deliberately, and all of his guilt was perhaps for nothing. So Narita did like an excellent job of using such a gut punch as Fermat's introduction or reintroduction. That's why whenever the name even gets brought up, like every time we hear Fermat, I feel like we all collectively go like, oh crap, like what's he doing now, Like that's the kind of response you always get from him. Like just a name drop is enough to give, some sort of shiver. And that's why he's so good or so well done. That's all that's required, and it makes the reader think always about what he's planning. What's he doing? What's he up to? What do I need to look out for? Who's in danger? Who's going to lose? Because at the very least, Fermat's always going to cause despair for one person. Like, someone will get hurt. And knowing he's in the 20th century, I mean, it's just going to keep happening. Like 300 years of torment, and he's still doing it. I mean, Elmer does get props for being the most consistent character, unchanging, that's true. But Fermat also seems like the same guy from the 1700s to now. He doesn't seem like he's changed all that much since then. I could be wrong, but that might be, something they actually have in common. The fact that they are unchanging in many ways. Or maybe there's more to be revealed, especially with Fermet's past. That's where so much of the, juicy content will be, I feel like. And I can't wait for, like, the reveal of what actually happened to Shez. One thing I love about Nareed's writing style is that despite everything, he knows that Fermet should appear in everything. In every novel so far, it's like 1700s, 1930s, 2000s, ever since his reintroduction in volume 13, but technically 12 because he was in that. Wait, was he? I don't know. Oh, well, yeah, copycat and all that stuff. So yeah, he was. Yeah, like he's been in all the novels. He was in 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, like Narita knows the presence Fermet has, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in 18, 19, and 20 as well, and onwards. Like, not necessarily as a big focus, because I feel like his big focus is gonna be in the 2000s. But yeah, he's gonna definitely have him set up things for the future, or just have him in the background doing stuff. So yeah, something in the 1930s or the 1935 arc, I feel like definitely will pay off in the 2000s. That's just the way the man writes, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, I've been trying to think about what other characters Fermet actually reminds me of, but I honestly can't. Like, if I say, like, someone who likes to torment people and plans for that, I know you would think I was talking about, like, the Joker or something, but he feels very distinctly different, like, unique in a way. I love how realized his character is, like, despite me not knowing anything about him at all I have to go off are his actions and things he chooses to do. Like, we don't have too much to go off. Like, nothing else, really. Like, we have bits and pieces, but that's all it is, bits and pieces. And yet, he still feels fully realized already, which is kind of wild. Like, there's a part of me who thinks that if I never really knew why he became the way he does, I wouldn't be disappointed. Like, there's enough of him doing stuff that already justifies his defeat and his existence. I don't know if I actually need it. I definitely want to know. And I definitely feel like I really, like, it would elevate the story. But I don't know if it's a need. But yeah, now that it's slightly built up, I definitely want to see it, though. But he really does function well on its own. Another thing that's interesting about Ferment is, how he joins the Mask Makers in the future storyline. It's just fascinating that he'd do that, and that he'd try to cause frustration for Lucina Campanella. So, like, another person he's tormented with his skills indirectly. That kid always thought it was Huey who killed Monica, but now he knows it's Ferment. So that'll be interesting going forward as well. I kind of wonder the decision behind wanting to join the Mask Makers. Maybe because he can't get the emotional reaction he wants from Huey, then he'll settle for, like, a descendant. You know what I mean? Like, compensating for the fact that he can't actually ultimately get what he wants from Huey either. Like, yes, killing Monica changed Huey, like, completely, and he did get that kind of emotional response. But, I mean, yeah, Huey was changed forever and he screamed, but the Huey that comes back isn't someone that Ferment can torment all that well anymore. It's almost like the greatest comeback of all time. Like, you come back and the person who hurt you can no longer hurt you at all. So maybe that's the decision to go after Lucina. Maybe that's why he did that. I think it would be. Like, the greatest emotional responses comes from making things personal. So I don't think choosing Lucina was on a whim. Like, not at all. I think like, being part of the Mask Makers was definitely planned and calculated, and we definitely know that just based on everything he did. But what I'm saying is maybe the decision to go after the Mask Makers, and having Lucina be part of the plot, like, all of that was to maybe compensate for the fact that he can't actually get the emotional response from Huey anymore. Maybe that's what turned the gears in Fermet's mind to create that ultimate situation with the two ships. Yeah, and he's trying to hit multiple people at once. He's trying to hurt Shez with that whole scenario as well. And he did lose, so that's also kind of funny when you think about it. Like, I do like that Fermet isn't super menacing. He's just a crazy person who we always have to look out for. And I think it's good that he isn't intimidating, but as readers, we always have to kind of have our guard up. Like, that's the experience of Fermet, and that's kind of why I like his character. That I can't trust him at all. Um, Sometimes it's hard to even believe the words that's coming out of the character's mouth. So maybe the reader is also a part of his manipulation, I guess. I mean, the reader does like to play with your expectations, and Fermet is a fantastic character to do just that. So in a way, like maybe Fermet is a stand-in for the part of narrator's personality that likes to scheme and manipulate his audience. And I don't mean to make it sound nefarious. Like all good writers, are doing that to some extent, right? Like you want your readers to feel something. Um, but yeah, like another interesting moment with Fermet was when he saw Dalton kill himself to showcase his immortality. I mean, that was pretty wild. Like his expression was something of glee, like an evil child, and Dalton picked up on it immediately. Like I do wonder what made Fermet captured by immortality. Oh no, actually no, we get told why. We get told in volume 17 because I mean it's pretty bad, but it's because he can make himself and someone else immortal. He can torture them for eternity. That's why. Maybe that moment represented the ignition of that thought within his mind. Like Dalton in that moment realized that Fermat would, without a doubt, use immortality for its worst purpose. Like he could see that within him. That's just the kind of person Fermat is. Maybe that was the moment where torturing Shez for eternity came into view. Almost like seeing immortality with his eyes. Like the wonder of the eternal was actually lost on him. Like most people are afraid of death, and so immortality brings with it something that people yearn for, like the ability to not die. For Fermat, I don't think he particularly cares about like the denial of death or his own insignificance coming from death. But what he does value from immortality is the time. Like everyone would value extra time, but it would be in response to not dying. Like now that I don't have to die, I can do so much more and not be afraid. It would be response to the fear of death, but for Fermat, maybe it's not a response to the fear of death. Maybe he was never afraid of dying per se. Maybe his only fear is that he might run out of people to torture and to put into emotional turmoil. So the existence of immortality solidified that that just wouldn't be the case. That he would never run out. Like he would never get bored of torturing people, Like 300, like it doesn't seem like he would get bored of that because 300 years says he wouldn't. Like we have evidence for that. And Fermat doesn't, like blow his load like very quickly. Like he lets the peak experiences he's trying to receive build up over time. Like 300 years, and then he's like, you know what? Now I'm gonna torment Shez again. I mean, that's a long time to wait. He's got discipline, like that's for sure. Like you got to give him credit for that. Like it's impressive. Like he's not impulsive, not at all. He's far from that. And yeah, the machinations he does are the complete opposite of impulsive. They're very deliberate. Oh, and how could I forget? Like the way he torments Nikki as well. Like he's an evil dude. He connects with her, makes her fall in love with him, tries to kill her. Like that's a very long process. Like he goes through a lot of effort, a lot of manipulation. He's very willing to wait for the payoff. I mean, all throughout Volume 17, like he's going to do something terrible to her. Like you know it in your bones, and you see it clear as day. That's what he's doing. Yeah, so he's the emotional manipulating king. And yet, he can also become emotional himself. Like he couldn't control himself in front of Alma when him and Huey were fishing. Like no control. Like I do wonder if it disgusted him that they were able to get such an emotional rise out of him. Like the type of stuff he's always trying to get out of other people, and they did it on a whim as well. Like no plans, nothing, just being themselves, and then he's getting frustrated and emotional. Maybe he felt like the terror of that. Like at that instance, like what it feels like to be one of his victims. And for him to feel like one of his victims so easily, like no plan whatsoever. That must like kind of cut through him. Like maybe he felt shame and then kind of hated himself in that moment, but admitting to the actual gravity of what just happened would probably make him collapse. So yeah, I wouldn't be like surprised if in that instant, instead of, introspecting and seeing what that would actually mean for him, he probably kind of like threw it out of his brain and just been like, I hate Elma. And then that's probably how he decided that he was over that event. that it never happened. He might not be able to live himself if he doesn't do something like that. Anyway, those are just my general thoughts about Fermet. Yeah, I like the character. He's pretty evil, but he's a good villain. Yeah, he's a good character. He really moves the plot forward. He's fun to root against, but he also does make you feel terrible. You know, one of the things that I really hated was how he brought those people who enslaved Nikki, you know, to that location where she ends up, quote unquote dying. Like, he's terrible. Like, that's a pretty big understatement for the guy. There's definitely a worse word than terrible that you can use for him. But that's what also makes him compelling. Like, the degree of how terrible he is, how insane he is, and yeah, just how much of a schemer he is. But he also has there's so much to read into, with his character, even though we're not really told like what's actually going on with him. Like, we get tidbits here and there that we can piece together, which is what makes it really, really fun. But yeah, those are my thoughts about Ferment. So yeah, thanks for listening to me talking about Ferment for a while. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And yeah, next week I'll probably talk about another character, or I don't know, do something else. So yeah, stay tuned. And yeah, all right, laters.